Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. We couldn't be more excited to be hosting events during Secret Path Week in partnership with the Gord Downie and Channy Wenjack Fund. So the Downie Wenjack Fund is part of musician Gord Downie's legacy, and it embodies his commitment and that of both the Downie and Wenjack families to call Canadians to action in solidarity with the Indigenous peoples of this land. So the goal is to continue the conversation that began with Channy Wenjack's residential school story and to support the reconciliation process through awareness, education, and action. So classrooms across Canada have been joining us as we celebrate Indigenous scientists, artists, and leaders from across the country, and we work towards a meaningful reconciliation. So we're really excited for today's event, joined by Mair Greenfield, who was born and raised in North Bay, Ontario. She's a member of the Kebaowek First Nation. Mair has worked alongside Indigenous families and communities for more than a decade in different areas, including corrections, elementary and secondary, as well as post-secondary schools, things like community service learning, mentorship, and volunteer initiatives. So she began her work at the Rumie Initiative in 2016 and is now the Director of Indigenous Programs. So Rumie is a nonprofit tech startup with a vision of a world where everyone has access to quality learning. And Mair also volunteers with communities on a personal level, helping to support Indigenous language preservation. So Mair, it's so awesome to have you joining us live today. We've got a great group of classrooms hanging out with us, both on camera and on YouTube, and we're excited to get to know you a little bit better.
Well, thanks for having me. Okay, so hi everybody. I'd like to share my screen if possible now. Let's see if I can figure this out.
All right, looking good so far. Yep.
I think I got it almost. And then just got to get to the present button. There it is. All right. Well, ane, bonjour. Mair Greenfield, Indigenous, Giwe no Wikwed and Don Jaba, Kebaowek First Nation, Don Jaba, Giwe no Wikwed and Dayong, the Rumie Initiative, Donoki. So my name is Mair Greenfield. I'm from North Bay, Ontario. My family is from Kebaowek First Nation. I've been born and raised in North Bay, and I work with the Rumie Initiative. I just introduced myself in Anishinaabe, which is the Nipissing First Nation dialect here. I was taught by traditional language teachers, and it took me about 6 years to have the courage to introduce myself in this language. And I'd like to thank Muriel Sawyer, Blair Bocage, and Tori Fisher for teaching me how to introduce myself. And Tori actually helped me learn through digital. So it's very helpful that I work for the tech company and also learned how to introduce myself using technology. I do like to acknowledge the traditional territory when I go and visit anywhere. And luckily, this is the traditional territory of my own Nipissing First Nation. You can see right here by the heart that we're in Nipissing, and it's traditional territory of Nipissing First Nation, Anishinaabe, and we're covered by the Robinson Huron Upper Canada Treaties. And I always encourage people to try and investigate their own territory to make their own acknowledgements, and not always rely on the territory, traditional territories that are provided on the internet. So sometimes it's good to talk to other people as well. So today we're going to cover a little bit how Rumie works. We like to call ourselves a library for the cost of a book. I'll talk to you about my journey, and I tried to weave it with my work with community and music and technology. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Indigenous language preservation and the work that we've done at Rumie to support this, how I have been able to give back to my community thanks to technology, and some reconciliations that you might want to try. And then, of course, we can get into questions after that. So the Rumie Initiative, we're a whole bunch of things in one. So sometimes it gets a little bit complicated when I try to explain it. So first of all, we're a not-for-profit technology organization. I'm not sure how many of those there are in the world. I'm going to guess not very many. But what we do is we provide access to digital learning resources to those who need it the most. So folks that live in offline communities and remote communities all around the world. And we do this by using technology. One of the technology pieces we've built is called the Rumie LearnCloud. And this is an online repository of digital learning materials that are available at no cost to everybody. So anyone can use it and anyone can volunteer on our LearnCloud. And people upload resources that they've created themselves or that they've found that are open and shareable for the whole world to access. Then we also create our own technology solutions. So we have our own tablets that we've created. Our most recent tablet can hold up to 30,000 textbooks, which is why we call it a library for the cost of a book. And the nice thing about us is we're also a not-for-profit, so we sell our technology at cost. So at the moment, our tablets are sold for $200, and they come with a full library of choice by the community. And then I always say it comes with me because I usually help support any kind of building of the libraries or any kind of digitizing that needs to be done to create these libraries. So I'm going to start with my journey. And I did try to weave as much of my own personal journey in with technology as it developed over the years, and also with the music, because a lot of the time I found that music really sparked my journey into Indigenous work. So the black being the technology part, and the blue being my own personal, and then the orange being the music. So from roughly 2001 to 2006, the internet had just really started getting going, and people started using it for work and schools. And I'm assuming many of you weren't even born at this time. I started going to college, and this is when the internet was just starting. So we learned how to use and build websites with coding and HTML tags, it was called at the time. And then I also learned how to use computer design and photography. And at this time, it was a little bit embarrassing for me because I had never used a computer before. So a lot of the kids or students in my class all knew how to use the computer, and I didn't. So they all helped me, which I thought was really, really awesome. But then it also made me realize that not everybody has the same level of technology literacy as other people. So it's always really good to be patient with people when they're learning how to use computers. And then I went with my family, and we went to a Fred Eaglesmith picnic at this time. And I was able to hear Charlie Angus speak. He's also a singer, and he's running for the NDP, which is not really a plug for today, but it just happened to be my presentation for today for the election. But Charlie Angus was speaking about Attawapiskat, and he was speaking about Shannon Kustashin, and he was speaking about how water wasn't clean there, and schools were not available, and they weren't safe. And I turned to my friends and I did you just hear what he said? And they was like, yeah. And I said, did you know this was happening? And they said, no. And I was like, neither did I. This is wild. How is this happening in Canada? So it really started my journey into more investigating and finding out what's really going on in Canada. So I did continue on to go to university, and I switched streams from graphic design to criminal justice. My end goal was to be a lawyer, so I could work with my community on different ways to make things better. But in the meantime, at this time, this is when the iPhone started coming out and iPads were brand new. And I finished my university degree, and then I went and worked in a corrections facility. It was all with young offenders. And a lot of the youth that were at this place were from James Bay area. And I found that to be quite strange, being in North Bay. And that was because there was no facilities up there either. So there was no schools, and I found it a really hard time for these youth that were having to be away from their homes. And then I also found this was interesting too, because a lot of the programming that we delivered was through VHS tapes or DVDs, and the kids would listen to music on a Discman. So from that, I left there and I started working at Nipissing University with the Criminal Justice Department, where I graduated from. And during this time, Attawapiskat had a state of emergency. So what we did was we got a whole bunch of community members together, people from the university. We all worked together. We put a fundraiser together, and we hosted Derek Miller, who's an amazing Indigenous artist from Canada, and Digging Roots, and Holly Cunningham. All these great people volunteered their time, and we raised almost $5,000 to send to Attawapiskat at this time. So then this led me to finding a new home in the Office of Aboriginal Initiatives. So I was able to lead mentorship and volunteer programs, and we designed mentorship programs and peer-to-peer programs all out of our office, working with volunteers from the teaching degrees, from criminal justice. All the students in the school were able to volunteer for tutoring and community placements. And it was also at this time that I began to learn about my own culture, because I got to work very closely with elders and traditional knowledge teachers. And I wasn't raised in my community, so I didn't know a lot of what had happened. So even when Gord Downey said, you know, we were taught not to learn or not to know, and it's a true case too with a lot of Indigenous peoples. We were taught not to learn as well. So if we move over to 2013, what I started to notice when I was running those projects was a lot of our students come from remote areas to learn, and a lot of our students were mature learners. So families would be moving from remote areas to attend college or university. And, you know, people would get homesick, and it's a culture shock, and it's a totally different way of living that in an urban area than it is in a remote Indigenous community. So I always thought that technology could play some sort of piece in making folks feel more comfortable, learning more about the community that they've moved to, and offering support for families. So I started to investigate, and I looked into one laptop per child, and I thought that was an amazing concept, and I really thought it was a really good idea. So I tried to implement it, but the technology just wasn't there at the time. So then we moved to avatars, and we had actually built a university. You can see at the bottom, that's Nipissing University. And we had a place where students could come into, it was kind of like The Sims. They could come in and they could sit around a fire. They could talk to elders. They could have tutoring. And it was neat, but it didn't quite work as well as we hoped. And then once iPads started to come out with new generations, then the older technology was left behind at the school. So I came across a pile of iPads, first generation, and Nipissing University donated them to our program. So we had about 20 tablets that our students were able to use to help tutor or have games for the kids at our youth groups and things like that. The one thing that we found was missing was spotty internet, or if we didn't have a password to Wi-Fi, then it just didn't really help out very much, and it kind of added more frustration rather than support the programs that we were doing. Meanwhile, Rumie was just getting going at this time, so they had their first pilot project in Haiti. And what they did at this time was they preloaded the tablets with content that they thought was interesting. We didn't have the LearnCloud at this time. And our first tablet was a 7-inch screen, and it had about 8 gigs of memory, which still holds a lot of textbooks, but we did move on from that. So moving along, you can see these are our tablets that we've gone through over the last few years. In 2014-15, they moved to the 8-inch screen and doubled their the storage space. And then they built the LearnCloud, and that it's gone a lot better since then. So in 16-17, Rumie formed some relationships with Indigenous communities, and it was recommended that they have an Indigenous lead to run these projects. So the founder flew in from Toronto to meet me, and we went for lunch, and he hired me right on the spot. And I thought, well, this is really strange, but awesome at the same time. So I started working with Rumie. We had another tablet introduced. And meanwhile, in this time too, the Tragically Hip, Gord Downie became ill. And the Tragically Hip too has been a major role in my life, of course, growing up in high school, and we've always gone to the Hip concerts. So when we went to his final concert, and I couldn't believe my eyes when he started talking to the Prime Minister and talking about our First Nations and how he needs to do something and how Canada needs to do something. And that was another time I turned to my friends and I said, did you just hear what he just said? This is amazing. So Gord Downie is going to change so much for so many people of all this work we've been trying to do for so many years. And Gord Downie is going to really help do that. So I was pretty taken back and really happy with that. So moving into 2018, 2019, the tech part, we released an app. So we're still working on it. It's getting so much better. And then we were funded by Loyalty One to do a language preservation project. So I got to work with local film producer Riggin Pictures here. And we were also able to gift 60 tablets throughout Ontario, full of learning resources. We also consulted with George Cucci from Red Tail Hawk on the film Cultural Mindfulness, and I really highly recommend anyone watch this if you want to learn a little bit more about cultural mindfulness and history. And to date, we have more than 130 Indigenous language and dialects that you can find on the LearnCloud, and I'll speak a little bit more to that in the next slides. Rumie's in 29 countries now, and we also work with refugee camps and post-Civil War areas and remote communities in Canada. And we have over 100 different partnerships working on Indigenous projects in Canada, which includes content sharing, our solution sharing, and LearnCloud solutions. And we've officially partnered with the Downie Wenjack Foundation. So all of the legacy school collections can be found on the LearnCloud as well. So if the teachers want to download it, then they're all there for available download. So I was going to say a little bit more about the Indigenous language projects that we've been working on. When I started with Rumie, I was working with Nipissing First Nation, and I found that some of my days were a little bit slow. So what I decided to do was I was going to build some language collections on the LearnCloud. So I started Googling. I'm a professional Googler. I like to consider myself that. I've been Googling for 3 years now. So what I would do was I would look up different dialects in Canada, and I would cut and paste from the internet, and I would put it in my Google search bar, and I would add PDF, or I would add app, or I would add YouTube, and then I would see what kind of results I would have. So I found out that that worked really well. So since then, I've built over 130 collections of resources. Some of them have one, some of them have 100 resources. And then I started talking to our neighboring communities and friends, and I started to learn that there's lots of resources in community, but they need to be digitized. So I offered to help digitize. So different ways of doing that, just from paper to PDF. So I could just use my phone and take a picture and save it as a PDF, and we could put it on the LearnCloud or put it on their tablets to use. So VHS to MP3 to make it a digital file. And then also now you can go right from DVD to YouTube. So we found there was a lot of DVDs with language and cultural teaching. So we added those right to the First Nation websites. And then also some other things that I do is we have a local language class here in Nipissing First Nation, and the teachers often post the learning and teaching on Facebook. So I cut and paste it, and then I put it into other digital docs and save it as a PDF. And giving back to community, I wasn't able to get my status until after I was finished university. And when I became status, my mom said, you need to give back to your community. So I was always wondering how I was going to do that, and which was why I wanted to be a lawyer. But then finally it came full circle when we had our Loyalty One project, and I reached out to our education director, Rose Jawbone, and said, would you be interested in having some tablets gifted to your students? And she said, yes, we would. We have students that travel from Quebec to Ontario every day to go to school, and these would be very helpful for them while they travel. So yeah, so I got to give back, and it was wonderful. And I wasn't raised on my First Nation with my tradition. I had to learn a lot of this as I've been growing. And what I learned during these teachings is that the history is always inside of you. You just have to find it. And then sometimes it takes you a long time to find your path, and sometimes it's different. But we all walk different paths, and we all have a story. So looking at something maybe you can do and reconciliations, my number one recommendation is always to listen to Indigenous community and follow the lead of that community. And some great resources obviously have already been created and are ready for teachers and schools. I like to recommend the First Nations Child Caring Societies, 7 Free Ways to Make a Difference. Cindy Blackstock's work is amazing. And I implement them also. I work in my daughter's class. That's my daughter down there. And we host Have a Heart for First Nations. We also host it at Rumie. We have reconciliations at Rumie quite often as well. And we do Spirit Bearer Day. So we bring your teddy bear to school and just chat with the schools. And there's some more teacher resources on the LearnCloud that are available as well that are listed here. And I also built a reconciliation, a LearnCloud library if anyone would like to access that. You just have to send me an email. So that's the end of my presentation. So miigwech, and thank you. And if there's any questions, then that would be great.
All right, Mair. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today. One thing I definitely picked up from your presentation is you're a very busy person. You've got lots of things on the go, and you've looked for lots of different ways to not only give back to your community, but communities, all around the world. So awesome. Great work that you're doing.
Oh my God.
And if I can just get you at the top of your screen, it should be a red stop screen share, and that'll bring you back to us for the Q&A.
Oh, great. There we go. Perfect.
All right, you're back. And, on that technology pieces, I think we take for granted that we have access to the whole world at our fingertips, but not everybody does. So again, the work you're doing through Rumie is incredibly important to make sure that there's that equality where everybody can access this technology and this knowledge that we have. All right. Well, I can see someone in Vernon, British Columbia, front and center at their camera already. So there's some grade 5, 6s hanging out with Mrs. Spear. Let me turn their microphone on. How are we doing, Vernon?
Good. Our school is on the unceded lands of the Okanagan Silk First Nations. And how do you become a digital citizen and get a tablet or an iPad from Rumie?
Okay, well, we sell them at cost. So if you want to reach out to me, we can talk more about that. But there's other ways you can volunteer with us. You can do reconciliations that I recommended. There's so much you can do, and I can just share it all with you on the LearnCloud.
All right, very cool. So we're going to jump to our next classroom. We're going to go all the way to Cambridge, Ontario. So not too far from me is Mrs. Gill's grade 5, 6s. I'm going to get their microphone turned on. How are we doing, 5, 6s?
Good. What are some of the success and challenges you experienced with this project?
Well, some of the successes were definitely reaching people that we wouldn't normally get to reach out to. We've spoken with people all the way in James Bay and sent tablets there full of resources that they might not have had access to. So that is a real big success for me. And also leading into the language preservation. I didn't expect that to happen when I started at all. I thought we were going to be like training and sharing technology, and I never quite realized how helpful and supportive that technology can be. Challenges, building the Indigenous dialects was a challenge for me as well, because if you look, it's impossible to find how many there are in Canada. Some websites say 60, some stats say 100, but I've already found 130. So it's interesting the way things have been documented when it comes to Indigenous history and what's going on in Canada. Also, some of the challenges are maybe the different levels of technology literacy and delivering internet resources to areas that don't have the internet. So it's kind of a little bit of an oxymoron where we expect folks to know what kind of digital resources are available for when there is no internet in their area. So building those libraries and offering different examples to different communities has been eye-opening as well. We found one place, we were in Nunavut, and we had the dialect of Initiative language on their library, and it was from their community, and they didn't even know it existed. So that was pretty cool.
All right, so I want to give a shout out to Mrs. Bailey Bean's class in New Liskeard. They're tuning in live via YouTube. They just introduced themselves, so send us in the question. I'll make sure that I work that in. While we wait for that, we will go to Mr. Williams' group in Courtenay, British Columbia. Let's get their microphone turned on. How are we doing, Courtenay?
How many schools have you worked with?
I honestly don't even know. So that will go back to a challenge that we have with our technology. We find that our tablets get passed around. So we're probably in maybe about 50 schools. Active schools, probably 10 or more. But what we find too is sometimes there's high turnover in teaching in remote communities. So once we get someone trained, they often move on to another school. So then we have to wait for our next teacher to find them and then reach out to us. And usually it's a phone call. So it's a bit of it's a hard question to answer when we're in offline communities. And then also we find that our tablets get donated, so they get split up and then donated into different areas.
All right, so that leads to a question or two from YouTube. So the first one that we have here is, what is your long-term goal with the Rumie project? Is it maybe reach or materials that can pass on? What's your long-term goal?
My long-term goal with Rumie is not to work with Rumie anymore, not to have a need for Rumie. So my long-term goal is to have a personal library in the hands of every person on the planet. And I don't think that's too far-fetched, because I was reading there's more devices on this planet than there are people. So it would be nice to provide someone with their own personal library in every place.
All right, I like that. A goal to put yourself out of business, take yourself out of a job. That's a good goal.
Yeah.
All right, back to Vernon, British Columbia. I see someone with their whiteboard right up front.
My question is, how do you get people to search for videos and books using Rumie?
Well, we use our LearnCloud, and we have volunteer workshops and programs. And once you get on the LearnCloud, you'll see that we have different projects that you can add to, or if there's something that's your favorite, like hockey or reading or something like that, you can build a collection and you can share how you do things with people. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And Mair, just to maybe help some of the students who might not know too much about LearnCloud, what is, like, just in like a couple sentences, the cloud?
The cloud is like a library. So picture it like a library. Has everybody seen Harry Potter? So when they walk into the library in Harry Potter and it's all these spells that these young wizards that want to learn, it's kind of like that. So it's like a library, but only your own personal library.
All right, it's a library where you can curate yourself. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna steal another question from YouTube. And so this one, you know, the materials that you're sending out are going to remote communities that have, you know, limited to no kind of internet access. And so this class is wondering about power. Is that an issue in any of the communities, getting them charged? And if so, is solar something?
Not yet. It hasn't been an issue yet. Usually they just plug them into whatever power they have there.
All right, perfect. Let's swing back to Cambridge, Ontario. Mrs. Gill's class, your microphone is on.
How is the education of Indigenous people impacted by internet usage and access?
It's impacted in some areas that people don't have the access. So some areas don't have the internet. So it's not fair, actually. It's just it's a hard one to. That's a really good question to answer. If there was internet in remote communities, then they would be able to access the resources. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So we try to solve that by delivering resources that students might want to learn on our tablets.
And to build on that, I think he's curious too about the impact. Do you get stories back? Have you seen some of the impact that Rumie's had?
Yeah, we have. We deliver all sorts of resources. So it's not just digital, like it's not just literacy and numeracy. We also supply language and cultural teachings and mental health resources. So we've had some stories that it's really helped a lot of young people learn things that they might not have been able to learn if they didn't have the tablet. Some kids use them in their rooms at night. Some people take them home for homework. So there's all sorts of different areas that it supports for people.
All right, so let's swing back to our class in Courtney and see if they have another question for us. Let me get that microphone turned on.
Question ready?
Hi.
All right, that's okay. Give me a wave if I do need to come back to your group. Okay. All right, so let me check in on YouTube one more time, and then I'll also ask for our other classrooms because we have about 5 minutes left. So give me a wave if I need to come back to your classroom if you guys have another question for Mair. We'll make sure we come back to your classroom. I see waving in the other two classrooms, so we should go back there, and I'll keep an eye on YouTube as well. So Mrs. Gill's class, your microphone's on again.
Okay. We're just quickly wanting to know about how receptive the Indigenous communities have been to restoring their language and preserving their language through Rumie.
Very receptive. Yeah, everyone's really, really happy to have this solution and utilize it. Some of the challenges are finding resources and that's pretty much it, but everyone's really, really excited to join this.
All right, very cool. It's great to use, technology as a way to preserve languages, because I think in some ways technology can kind of be a factor against that. With so much of the world kind of switching to English, we're losing so many different languages. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different languages around the world, and I think we're losing so many of them. So it's nice to see technology being used to the other way, take it the other way and preserve some of these languages.
Yeah, and it's nice to work with communities and their specific dialects. Some communities there, there's only a few speakers, sometimes one or two speakers, and sometimes, some communities have 35 speakers and they're really, really happy about that. So it's really interesting once you start looking into the different dialects and how many speakers there are and how people can build their own libraries for their own communities.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's hard to think about whole languages being, in the guardianship of one or two people. That's amazing when, thinking about our schools when we speak English and it's, there's no threat of that happening. But could you imagine if the English language was disappearing, how different that would be, how that would impact our communities?
And it's also really important that it's community owned and community led. So the community owns their resources, not Rumie.
All right, that is definitely an important thing. Vernon, British Columbia, someone in a blue zip. Let's get that microphone turned on.
Does copyright make it easy or hard to share cultural resources?
Copyright, not sometimes it is. It depends on who the publisher is. It's more, sometimes it's tradition as well. So there's certain things that can't be shared. And so we have private collections and private resources for communities as well, if they don't want to share or if they do want to share. But with copyright, if I find a resource that I find would be very helpful, I often just write to the producer of the resource. So for example, Downey Wenjack, and I ask if we can share, and oftentimes people say yes. Mostly because we're a not-for-profit and we're trying to do good things. So usually people don't really have a problem with us.
All right. So I'm curious, Mair, with your answer from earlier about hoping your long-term goal in the future is, to not need this type of position. What do you think you would do if that goal was ever achieved? Where would you turn your sights?
Oh, I'm not sure. Hopefully it won't be too long and I can retire and then just go around and talk to folks and go on vacations maybe. But yeah, no, hopefully it won't be too long. I'm not sure what I would do next.
All right. Well, I have a feeling that, you guys are doing some good work, but I think there's more momentum to come. So I don't think you'll have to worry about that for too long. But yeah. I definitely look forward to hearing where the project goes and where your next successes come from. So maybe we'll have to do another future event with the Downey Wenjack Fund and find out just how Rumie's grown and where you guys are heading.
That sounds good.
All right. Well, I want to give a shout out to our classrooms, both on YouTube and who joined us on camera. Thank you so much for your awesome and well thought out questions today. And then Mair, thank you for taking some time from your day to share your story and also the work that you're doing with Rumie.
Thanks, everybody. This has been an amazing experience. Chimigwech.
All right. Well, the last thing I'll do is I'm going to unmute all the microphones. So boys and girls, if you want to give a big goodbye and thank you, then we will sign off for today. So here we go. More than ready and willing for that part of the event. Again, Mair, thank you so much. A lot of fun hanging out today. And classrooms, we have one more day of Secret Path Week events tomorrow. We have 3 events spread throughout the day. So if you check out exploringbytheseatofyourpants.com, or you can head over to the Downey Wenjack Fund and check out their events. You can see the events we have tomorrow, and hopefully we have some of your groups joining us. So thanks everyone for today and have a great evening.